Hello, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Console. I'm glad to see you back here, this little corner of the YouTube internet space that we like to share with each other, chatting, seeing what's all new and cool in the world of JavaScript, because if you are like me, and you might be a little bit like me because you're watching this show, you like JavaScript as much as I do. This is the Console episode number 38. I've done this for 38 weeks, which is awesome. And this is the news from the past week from May 28th through June 3rd. Welcome to the month of June. May your weather be as warm as it has been the past couple of days in New York City. I am completely into shorts now because if I don't, I sweat through all my clothes. But enough about the weather. Let's talk about the new stuff that happened in the world that is JavaScript. That's JavaScript in case you couldn't tell. First news item of the week. My favorite JavaScript on the server piece of software, you know it as Node. And by you, I mean everybody does because it's called Node. They had a new minor version this past week, 10.3.0. And the most exciting thing about this new version is that it now includes NPM 6 by default. And that is great because NPM 6 has so many iterations of improvements from the NPM 5.x line. So now when you tell somebody new to install Node and they install the latest version, they get the latest version of NPM by default. And I'm very much looking forward to bringing that back to my team at work and actually have everybody use the same version of NPM. I'm really hoping that NPM 6 has finally fixed all the package lock issues that I've had in the past because that is the most annoying thing ever. So Node 10.3 is out. There's other bug fixes I'm sure in there, but I don't really care about that. All I care about is that NPM 6 is there. Speaking of Node still, because we gotta stay in the back before we can get to the front, right? Back end. Node had their 2018 user survey report came out. This is one of those, developers send in their response, their answers, they collate them, they have some, information about what type of language you like to use, where do you use Node, how long have you used Node for. It's always interesting to see what the environment and ecosystem looks like, so they have it publicly available. Something that I found very interesting, which is near and dear to my heart, is that they have a section called specific tools and technologies used with Node.js. And there's different back-end, front-end that you use with Node.js, and there's one for databases. And the first most used database piece of technology is a JSON file. Which makes sense if you're prototyping something, you can just use JSON file on your local file system. But the second most used database with Node.js is MongoDB, my employer. So that's really awesome to see that I'm actually working at a place that people like to use, which is always nice to see that I have that there. So if you do use MongoDB, thank you. And speaking of MongoDB, because why not plug my employer a little bit more? Legitimately good, awesome news is that the first RC0 for MongoDB 4.0 was released to the wider public. And in case you don't know, the big marquee feature of MongoDB 4.0 is that it has finally added support for transactions. And that's transactions to a replica set. Not yet a cluster. I don't really need a cluster for the purposes that I use MongoDB for. I usually just use one node or just a replica set, which is 3 MongoDBs and ones. I know this because I work there, but also I use MongoDB. But transactions are very cool to see. It's one of the big last marquee features people have been wanting from MongoDB. So the RC0 is out. If you want to play with it with your Node.js application, you would be in the majority. And let's start talking about the TC39 committee, my favorite thing to talk about. I love talking about the TC39 committee. It's just so cool to see the new things that are coming down the pipeline with JavaScript. And you may have been familiar with this new proposal for JavaScript called decorators. And there was an implementation, there's an earlier version of the decorators proposal done a couple years ago. There was an implementation made. Angular framework uses decorators a lot. However, they found some issues with it and they actually overhauled the entire spec for decorators. And there's a now version 2, or I'm not really sure what they call it, but there's a new version of decorators that they've been working on. And up until this past week, there's been no way for us, the general population, to use decorators in our applications, the new decorators in our applications, until this past week when a PR has been opened against the Babel repo that adds support for the new decorator proposal. And what's even cool about this is that the new decorator proposal was already stage 2. If you don't know, the TC39 goes from stage 0 to 4. 2's halfway there because numbers is awesome, which means that it's a little bit more stable than the first one. So hopefully this will actually become part of JavaScript itself. Again, stage 2, things can still change. But if you are using decorators already, if you want to use decorators, it's not yet merged into Babel itself, but it is then along its way to actually being included. So decorators are, the best way to make your language, your JavaScript code feel a little bit easier to write. It's also the best way to make a boring room look nice with decoration. News. TypeScript 2.9 came out this past week. It has new features, new cool things to use, and I encourage you to check it out. And last but not least, let me talk about VS Code, my favorite and only text editor. I'll never cheat on you, VS Code. You are my one and only forever and ever until something better comes out. They are experimenting with a new editor for settings in VS Code. If you use VS Code and you try to change your settings right now, you may be familiar with the large JSON object that you actually have to look around in to see what you can actually do with. And it's great, it's very programmer friendly. As an engineer, you're like, okay, cool, I get it, sweet. However, for a layperson or somebody who doesn't give a shit about JSON, you are actually going to be happy because they're working on a GUI settings editor. It's coming out. It's not coming out, they're working on it, they're experimenting with it. I imagine it's in the insider track. I'm excited to see what it looks like. I always love new things. It's always the best things just to be able to take off that packaging and smell that new settings editor smell. It's always so much fun. I enjoy it. Okay, and that was your console log episode number 38. I hope you enjoyed it. I am trying to figure out ways to add some more excitement to this channel, try to do some new things. I'm thinking about ideas, ways to make it a little bit more punchy, a little bit more fun. Nothing to share yet, but I'm trying to take this up a notch. I mean, we got the console log here. It's good, it's stable, it's dependable. But we gotta get something that's exciting, fresh, hot, cool. So that's what I'm working on in between not sleeping, because who needs sleep? You only sleep when you're tired, right? You heard that, right? That means that I think it's time for me to end this episode. I'll see you again next week. Talk to you then.